Hi, I'm Zara Altair, and this is Mystery Monday, where we talk about writing mysteries. And today I wanted to start off with a little story. Long ago, I was a sailor. I had my own boat in the San Francisco Bay, and a work friend of mine wanted to bring a fellow from Tennessee out on the water to see the lights of San Francisco from the water, which is always just a really beautiful experience. And we left the harbor in San Francisco, in Sausalito, which is across the bay from San Francisco. And we went out through the channel, and the lights of Tiburon were off to the left, and Angel Island was off to the right. And it was a really lovely evening. The moon was shining. It was just really fantastic. And as we started coming out of the other side of Angel Island, there was a huge fog bank. In the San Francisco Bay, there's what they call tongue fog, which comes through the Golden Gate and then kind of hangs over the water. And the fog was very dense and thick. And um, my boat was outfitted with minimalist electronics. And so I said, I saw the fog and I said, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to go over to San Francisco because it's really hard to see what's in the fog. And my visitor started complaining, and I said, no, I'm the captain. I'm responsible for your lives, and I'm not going in the fog. And so just as we got ready to turn around and go back, and this fellow was so disappointed, and I don't blame him, out of the fog came this huge transport ship. Huge. I mean, it was towered over us. And my visitor said, my God, that's like a mountain on the water skis, because it was going fast too. And I said, yes, and that's exactly why we're not going into the fog. Anyway, I wanted to share that story because you can get giant fog and big disasters in your story when you don't plan and you don't take charge. And so I thought I'd have just talk a little bit about avoiding the big fog bank in your story. You really want to avoid that. So it really has to do with preparation, and I know I've talked about this before, and it's a major theme in getting your story ready. There is a lot of prep, and it actually helps you write faster once you get everything all lined up. So I know we started with this, but who is your protagonist? And that's really important in a mystery, because your protagonist is the person that your readers follow as they go along in the story, and they want to know, what is his motivation and how does he approach the problem of solving the mystery. So the more you know about your protagonist, the better you're going to be. And what are all their quirks? What are their follies? What are their strengths? Um, It's not so much, their hair color or their eyes or how tall or short they are, but how they approach the problem. Because the reader's going to be following along with that approach in your story. So it's really important to know your protagonist. Uh, so in story creation, you want to know the protagonist's goal. And for mystery writers, that's pretty clear. They want to solve the mystery, and for whatever their reasons and their motivation, they want to find out who the killer is. It may be their job as a detective, or they may have been asked by a friend or relative to figure something out. Just depends on your story and your story world. But I can't stress how important it is to know your character inside and out. It just everything, the things that tick them off and make them angry, the things that make them happy, because you can put all those things in your story, and especially when they're confronting suspects and asking questions and looking at the clues. um, how they respond to all of this is going to be based on their character. So know your character really well. Their outside appearance is like icing on the cake. What you really want to know about your character is what makes them tick inside. Um, you also want to know a lot about your perpetrator, because you're going to be planting clues inside your story that ultimately lead to discovering who that perpetrator is. So you need to know a lot too about their motivations, their secrets, and the lies that they tell. And then plan some twists. They may come up as you're writing your story, but in the planning stage, if you plan a couple of twists, several, um, that'll help you. Oh my gosh, in this scene, I really want to make the person who seemed is innocent appear guilty, even if they aren't the actual perpetrator. Those are the kinds of obstacles you want to build for your detective. So part of, a big part of writing a mystery that readers really enjoy is creating the mystery of it all. And so the more you know, the easier it is to lead them along and get them wanting to know who did it as well. All right. Okay. So story structure can really help. If you start out with the everyday world, this is a place where you first show your detective interacting in his or her world, in and deliver at least one of his basic character traits. So immediately the reader has a reason to like or dislike, but maybe want to follow along with this character. So you're going to set up, at the beginning, you're going to set up the thing that gets often called the inciting incident, the thing that gets your detective on the trail. What is it? It could be that request from a friend. It could be he's next on call in his organization, but there's a reason that your detective wants to figure out who did it. And from that point on, you're going to be giving your character lots of complications and just giving your character lots of trouble. Um, and and so and you want to set up for the midpoint of your story. I know a lot of people struggle with getting the middle to be lively and not sag and keep the reader engaged. And I think one of the things you can do in the first part, your second act, is to really build in some complications, set your detective off on false trails, and just confuse the heck out of him and her. He wants to get it done. He thinks he's got the answer, and nothing is working. Um, at the midpoint of your story, you can mirror the ending in a couple of ways. It can be very similar to your ending or your climax, or it can be the opposite. But right in the middle, you want to have something that happens. I think the easiest way, if you want to learn how to do this, is to watch TV episodes, detective TV episodes, and if you stop pretty much in the middle, you'll discover that something has added to the story. Something has happened that makes the story even deeper. And that's what you want to achieve in the middle of your story. After the midpoint, you're heading toward the climax. And this is when um, your detective actually discovers who it is and confronts them and gets them to admit to the crime. So the whole second part of your second act after the midpoint is driving your detective toward the right suspect instead of all the other suspects. And lots of things can happen in the middle. Um, so there's some stages to building up your climax as well. And one is getting ready to confront him. So you could call it preparing for battles, getting all the evidence together. He's um, interviewing any last people who can give him more information about that particular suspect, and then finding the suspect. This is often where in the same TV episodes there's some kind of chase scene, or down in a dark building, um, over stairs, under stairs, car chase, whatever it is. There's some kind of going after them. Um, and then there's actually connecting with that perpetrator. And then the next step is the perpetrator kind of hedging or telling a believable lie that sounds like they didn't do it, and maybe your detective is on the wrong track after all. And then there's that final confrontation where your detective actually accuses them of doing the deed, and they admit to it. Um, I'm not a particular fan of flashbacks, but often in the same TV examples, you'd see, a reconstruction of how it actually happened. I really don't recommend that in your books. Um, so, you can watch these TV episodes because it's a really quick way to get the feel of how it goes. But I don't recommend flashbacks of the murder happening in your story itself. You want to get the perpetrator to actually confess, however that happens. And then really quickly, you want to tie up all your loose ends and bring your story to a conclusion. So you're going to start with the everyday life. You're going to get to that moment in time, often called the inciting incident, that brings your detective onto the chase. Then you're going to fuddle the heck out of him with clues, evidence that doesn't seem to make any sense, um, characters who are potential suspects but aren't for one reason or another. And then from the midpoint on, really honing in on getting toward the actual person who committed the crime. I really hope that helps you a lot, because what can happen if you don't sort of plan the sequence of your story ahead of time is you can end up in the fog. And the frustration of that is that you need to go back and change things, and you're going to do a lot of rewriting, you'll end up tossing maybe your favorite scene in the whole story, but now it doesn't work and you have to toss it. So you can save yourself a lot of headache and frustration by doing some essential planning. There's lots of ways to plan a story out there, and my suggestion is just pick one and do it. Um, the focus here on Mystery Monday is to make those story plans work with a mystery, because you want to deliver to your readers all the things they expect in a mystery story. So it doesn't matter if it's, crime, it's like police procedural, or amateur detective. It doesn't matter. The basic flow of the story for a mystery, um, and for readers to love your mystery, is to, one, love your character, love your main character, how irritating they might be, but they've got something that helps them um, solve the mystery. So I hope that kind of helps. I see people getting stuck. I'm actually reading a manuscript right now for someone and doing some comments and review for content editing. And it's easy to get stuck. So if you do some planning beforehand, you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble and you won't get stuck in the fog. Um, I hope you enjoyed that fog story. It was quite a moment, the mountain on water skis. So, also, I wanted to let you know, one, that I'm Sarah Altair, and this is Mystery Monday, and so glad you're here. And also that I am developing a course on mystery writing, and I will put a link to the course. It should be open June 1st of this year, um, to help writers, beginning writers, um, get through their story from beginning to end. Okay, questions and answers. Questions. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I finished reading The Peach Widow. I don't understand why a grown man would have a tutor. I like the characters, I just don't understand. Well, first of all, thank you for reading an Argolicus mystery, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And let me go into a little detail about Nicholas, the tutor. Argolicus' father was very traditional, and one of the traditions was to um, purchase a tutor slave to educate a child in not just mathematics and geography and rhetoric, some of the basic classic Greek education, but also in athletics and martial arts. And the thing is that also these tutor slaves were lifelong companions, and as the child grew into adulthood, they often served as their secretary, what we would call it, secretary, administrative assistant, whatever you want to call them. So they, took notes about things and wrote letters, and managed a lot of the daily functions of life for that Roman citizen. So that is why, even though Argolicus is a grown man in his early 30s, his tutor is there with him, and um, they have become quite friendly, and especially in solving the mysteries, they put their heads together to figure things out. Anyway, thank you once again for reading the story. I'm glad you enjoyed The Peach Widow, and I hope that answered your question about having a tutor who for an adult. Okay, here's another question. I'm having trouble ending my mystery. I created a romantic interest for the protagonist. Do I bring it to conclusion before or after the detective reveals the perpetrator? Wow, that is a really good question. And it's going to depend a lot on your story and your mystery subgenre. So, if you are writing something that's very logical, as it were, like a police procedural, and your detective finds a romantic interest, you're probably going to want to bring that romantic interest to a conclusion before he actually confronts the perpetrator. So that's one way of doing it. It's a subplot. You bring it to a conclusion before the conclusion of the main story. That's just how subplots work. So that works for thrillers, crime stories, police procedurals. Sometimes writers make that romantic interest someone who's like a helper for the detective. And in this case, it's kind of your choice. If you want to advance their relationship further, you can do that before the crime is solved, or if it's an important part, you can do it after, but keep it really short. The climax is pretty much, it's over. We found out who did it. They were confronted. They're guilty. And pretty much after that, you're going to bring the story to a very quick end. So don't draw it out. Now, the one exception to this can be romantic suspense, where there is a mystery involved, but romance is really the major reason the readers are there. In that case, you would bring that romantic interest in as the end, because that is what your readers want in romance, is the two people, whatever difficulties they have during the story, the two people are going to get together. And crime solving is actually kind of a subplot to their romance. So in that case, you're going to solve the crime first, and then bring those two people together, or separate them, whatever the final decision is. But that's one of the ways that genre is a little bit different. So that was a really good question. And to answer your question, short form is, it's really up to you. I don't know your book. I don't know your story. So with those little guidelines in mind, it's up to you and your genre that you are creating to bring the romantic element to a closure before the climax, which is pretty normal in mysteries. Or if you're writing in that particular romance subgenre where the mystery is a subplot, then the romance is going to come last. So it's up to you how you're going to bring that to a conclusion. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a great question. Well, thank you very much. So everybody, that's the end of questions today. So don't forget to subscribe to Mystery Monday. It's really easy on the Facebook page. You just click subscribe and enter your details, and it's a done deal. And that way you'll get notices just a few minutes before we start, so you can come on board. And thanks a lot, and I will see you next week.